Have you ever felt betrayed by your high school buddies or even your best friends? Well, few teenage betrayals go as badly as they went for Skylar Neese. She was a bright 16-year-old girl with nothing but A grades, and her whole life was ahead of her. She trusted her best friends with her life, but sadly that was a terrible mistake. What Sheila Eddy and Rachel Scoff did to the friend was beyond the nightmares. Let's talk about Skylar's life. Skylar was born on February 10, 1996 to Mary and Dave Neese. Mary worked as a medical assistant and Dave was a product assembler at Walmart. Skylar, Mary, and Dave lived together in Star City, a tiny peaceful suburb in West Virginia. Skylar was a very smart and sociable girl. As early as nursery school, she made a best friend, Morgan. Morgan was another only child, and they were pretty much sisters. Either Morgan would be at Skylar's place or Skylar would be at Morgan's. Skylar and Morgan grew up together until they were high school girls with career goals. Morgan wanted to become a meteorologist and Skylar a criminal lawyer. They had also made a vow to each other to be in each other's wedding parties. But with high school came new friends and Skylar started drifting apart from Morgan. She was still a sociable animal and would have a gang of her own at Morgantown University High School. Friends came first for her. She was always about hanging out with friends if she didn't have work or school. Skylar had soon found two BFFs, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Shelf. They were also only daughters. Soon, the trio was inseparable, calling themselves the Three Musketeers. Now all of their pictures showed the three of them together. Most of the fun the girls had together was of the naughtier kind, sneaking out at night, smoking in the forest, doing ever so slightly dangerous things, and worrying their parents every day. Skylar parents weren't more worried than any other regular teenage parents. Skylar had known Sheila since they were about 8 years old, as their families lived close to each other and were friends. But as Sheila got closer to Skylar and they started calling themselves Sister Forever, Dave and Mary started thinking that something was off with Sheila. Sheila felt like she was in the center of the universe. If it didn't involve her, she didn't care about it. But although they weren't too fond of Sheila, never did Skylar's parents think that their daughter would be in danger around her BFFs. After all, they were just a bunch of rowdy 16-year-olds. In the summer of 2012, Skylar had finished her first high school year and decided she was going to work for a few months. She got a job at Wendy's and enjoyed every shift there, earning her first pocket money and feeling more independent. Now about Skylar's disappearance. On July 6th, around noon, Dave came into Skylar's room during his lunch break at work. He wanted to eat with his daughter, but her bed was unmade and her windows were cracked open. He also mentioned, "I thought she was out with her friends. I figured they went swimming or shopping." Since no one knew where Skylar could be and she wasn't answering her phone, Dave stepped outside the house, panicking, and that's when he saw something truly strange. Skylar's bedroom window, which was on the ground floor, was slightly open, and a tiny bench was placed outside the window. Dave was now angry at Skylar. He also said it looked like if she'd run away from home. But at this time, Paul Scott himself. He also called her for over 10 times. Mary was putting on a brave face and trying to act calm and rational until Skylar turned up. She knew her shift at Wendy's would start at 4 p.m. the next day. Mary could hardly contain her tears at the thought of her daughter being gone forever, but she didn't want to believe it yet. She was frantically searching for answers when she got another call. It was Sheila. Sheila said that she had to tell me the truth, and I said, "Well, what truth?" She said, "Well, we did snuck out last night." This made sense. Skylar had left the tiny bench under her window so she could climb back up and act as if nothing happened the next day. Also, Skylar had snuck out with Sheila and Rachel before. They'd gone out for a late-night drive around the town, but the police caught them out after the night curfew and sent them home. So perhaps Sheila was telling the truth, and the girls tried to do the joyride once more. But then why hadn't Skylar come home? Mary asked Sheila where's Skylar, and she said that Skylar insisted that they drop her off at the end of the street so we wouldn't hear her sneaking back in. Teasing the given information together, Dave and Mary figured out Skylar might have been kidnapped from the end of the street to their home. Immediately, they rang the police. Star City has a population of 1,800, so immediately Skylar's disappearance made the headlines and struck a chord with every resident. Skylar going missing was a tough pill to swallow for the entire community. When the police officer Jessica Colbank took Skylar's case, she first assumed it was a runaway. There are several cases of teenagers running away from their families, temporarily or not. But there were two things that didn't add up. First, Skylar had left the bench under her window, which meant she had planned to come back. Second, Jessica looked at the video from the security cameras on Nee's house. It showed Skylar getting into a car at 12:30 a.m. Dave Nees watched, horrified, as there on the tape outwalked Skylar. The problem was that Sheila had said she drove Skylar back to her house at midnight and that she and Rachel went to bed afterward. So who was driving this car and why did Skylar hop into it? Mary and Dave were working together with the police to uncover the story behind their daughter's disappearance. But as they connected the security camera footage to Sheila's story, they had convinced themselves that Skylar had snuck out a second time at 12:30 a.m. with someone other than her BFFs. After all, why would her best friends lie? Furthermore, the footage had such low resolution that the police couldn't identify the make of the car or the license plate. And because Skylar could be seen leaving in her own accord, the police couldn't issue an Amber Alert either. Once that video came out, she willingly got into this car. They're not going to come out and look for somebody driving around in a car. While the nieces were getting desperate and hopeless, Sheila started visiting their place and saying how worried she was about Skylar's disappearance. Once she asked Mary if she could go into Skylar's room. She sat on her bed and said, "How could she do this to us? I'm her best friend. Why doesn't she at least call me?" Remember these lines as they're about to get very dark. A few months into the investigation, the West Virginia police told Mary and Dave that they thought Sheila and Rachel were more involved than they let on. In fact, they became the main suspects in Skylar's disappearance. This was impossible to conceive for Dave and Mary. They were an inseparable trio who always seemed happy together and as tight-knit as a friend group can be. Now Sheila and Rachel were active members of the community, searching for Skylar. They would knock on the doors and ask, "Have you seen this girl?" And we kept showing the picture to people. Nobody had seen her. So if Sheila and Rachel were so desperate to find Skylar, why would they lie about the night of 6th July? But Sheila's game was strong. She even seemed worried about her best friends. She kept telling her bestie Chrissy that she really worried about Skylar. She was trying so hard to keep them find anything, so hard to help them figure out what had happened. When Star City organized a candlelit vigil for Skylar, Sheila and Rachel came and sat in tears next to Skylar's parents. The only thing Mary could say was, "What can we do to help these girls?" But Mary was trying to offer comfort and closure to the people who had murdered her daughter. She had no idea what the two girls had done to Skylar on that fateful night and what lengths they could go to conceal the horrific truth. It was towards the end of 2012 that Jessica excluded the possibility of Skylar running away. Usually runaways to take items with them they want, especially if she had contacts and glasses. She didn't take that stuff with her. Skylar hadn't used her phone or ATM ever since July 6th and the night she disappeared. Around that same time, the police turned their attention toward two bank robberies in Blacksville, a neighboring city. Detective Ronnie Gaskin was put in contact with the Star City police after the tip that Skylar had gone partying with the robbers when she disappeared. There's just rumors, gossip going around that was this teenage party. There was a possible overdose and the people there were scared so they hid the body. But Skylar had never used heavy drugs or gone to huge underground parties. However, Ronnie didn't know this for sure. He and Jessica followed rumors and sightings of Skylar all over the United States to no avail. All the while, the answer was right there in Star City. The rumors. Mary and Dave Nees weren't the only ones shaken by Skylar's disappearance without a trace. Back at school, several of her friends were finding it hard to adjust to the world without her. But students seemed to know more than their parents. Rumors were spreading to all social media platforms between Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You just see things start to get out of control. By out of control, Morgan means that the rumors were simply very diverse and very, very many. Some said that Skylar had OD'd. Some said that she had changed the country. But the students who were close to Sheila and Rachel, like Daniel, were starting to paint a different story. Sheila and Rachel were trying to protect someone, either Skylar themselves or someone else involved in her disappearance. There were probably a good 3, 4, or 5 times where I told Rachel, I know you know something. You need to say what had happened or where she's at. Soon enough, both Twitter and Facebook were swarming with posts about Sheila and Rachel hiding something. In September, the FBI arrived at Morgantown University High School. They interviewed every student who is a colleague or friend of Skylar's and even asked several questions about Sheila and Rachel. Daniel told them that the girls didn't seem different after July that year, but they did seem more secluded and close to each other. Meanwhile, Mary and Dave simply couldn't believe that Sheila or Rachel had been involved. If anything, they were trying to protect them from all the stress the FBI was causing. But Ronnie knew Sheila had something to hide, and he continued to interview her. But it was a whole different story with Rachel. She would refuse to make eye contacts, and she seemed very distracted. She would draw on the desk, play with pencil. Her non-verbal cues spoke a lot. Both girls kept saying the same story over and over again. They picked up Skylar before midnight, drove around for a bit, smoked some, then dropped her off at the end of the street at midnight, but they refused to give any more details. At the same time, the police were starting to collect physical evidence. CCTV footage from a gas station showed Sheila's car heading west towards Blacksville, not east like she said. Rachel's phone had also pinged off a cell tower in Blacksville that night. By now, Dave and Mary had accepted that the two girls were hiding something. They were posting on social media too, urging the girls to come forward with the real story behind Skylar's disappearance. In November, Rachel submitted to the police pressure for the first time. Asked about the Blacksville footage, she admitted that they did drive there, but she said that Skylar had asked them to drop her off there the next day. Sheila told the police the exact same story word for word. At school, Sheila kept her calm, but Rachel couldn't do it anymore. Rachel seemed distressed, like she was very upset over something. This was eating her at heart. It was January 2013, and 6 months had passed since Skylar's disappearance. Dave and Mary hadn't celebrated the winter holidays and had entered a hopeless, depressed state of mind. Sheila and Rachel had stopped coming to school. Rachel was fighting constantly with her parents, up to the point where her mom wouldn't call her anymore. The 911 had escalated past raising voices and calling names. Do you hear those blood-chilling screams in the background? Rachel had simply lost all control over her emotion. Rachel was picked up and taken to a mental health facility in town. 2 days later, she contacted Ronnie, asking to meet at her lawyer's office. The real story about Skylar's death was a very dark one. Sheila and Rachel had been planning Skylar's death for months prior to July, plotting its exact detail and perfect timing. While meeting with Skylar and acting like BFFs on July 5th, Rachel got a shovel from her father's home and put it in Sheila's trunk. They then prepared sets of clean clothes, cleaning products, and big kitchen knives from Sheila's home. At 12:30 a.m. on July 6th, Rachel and Sheila got to Skylar's place. They had convinced her to come to a night drive with them. Skylar walked to the car and to her death. The three girls drove to Blacksville and stopped at the edge of a forest to chat and smoke. Once the girls were out of the car, they told Skylar they had forgotten to bring a lighter. Skylar said she'd go to the car and get hers. While she turned her back to the girls, Rachel said, "On 3. Sheila and Rachel counted to 3 and began attacking Skylar with the knives they had kept hidden in their hoodies. They attacked her with all their physical strength. Skylar ran away but could only make it a few feet. Rachel tackled her to the ground, and Skylar kept fighting. She grabbed Rachel's knife from her hand and cut her ankle, but she couldn't defend herself from both girls. In her final moments, Skylar just said, "Why?" The girls said nothing and let their former friend die in agony, wondering what was happening and what she had done to deserve this. When Skylar's neck wasn't making any more gurgling sounds, the girl tried to dig a hole and bury her, but the ground was hard and rocky. Eventually, they just left her body next to a creek and covered it with rocks and branches. Then they cleaned themselves, changed into fresh clothes, and drove off, returning to their lives as if nothing had happened. When Ronnie asked Rachel why they had done this, she just said they didn't like Skylar. "I don't know about you, but if I don't like someone, I just don't hang out with them." Anyway, the police were just baffled at Rachel's answer and were trying to dig deeper into the girl's motivation and the whole story. Meanwhile, the detectives found the murder scene Rachel had described just on the border of Pennsylvania. There, Skylar's remains were found and identified. The police notified Mary and Dave of a body being found, but they didn't tell them about Rachel's confession. It was a part of an ongoing investigation, and they didn't want the niece to tamper with it. News of Skylar's death traveled fast and the community was all grief-stricken. Star City Police did not arrest Rachel as soon as she made her confession. Ronnie wanted to use her to make Sheila incriminate herself, and he was right. Knowing Rachel's position, Sheila came forward. She tweeted this photo with herself and Rachel captioned, "Finally got to see." The police went to Sheila's home with a warrant and seized every kitchen knife in there. They also seized Sheila's car and found DNA inside her trunk. While they sent it to the lab and waited for the results, the police also made the news public of Skylar's body being found. The University High School community was shaken by the news and confused as to Sheila and Rachel's involvement. Sheila has always seemed very upset at the loss of her best friend. Sheila put on a show meant to convince everyone around her that she was devastated by Skylar's death. But Ronnie wasn't done with Sheila. The police were all too aware of Sheila's other social media posts. The happy, the casual pictures she kept posting with Rachel. The locals would whisper in each other's ear and say, "How are they still free?" Most people in Sheila's close circle suspected she'd done it. If there were any doubts about it, on March 31st, she tweeted, "We really did go on 3, meaning she and Rachel did count to 3 and then stabbed their former best friend." She was getting cocky, like many murderers do when they're not caught in the first few months. It's unbelievable that she feels so invincible to tweet this publicly. Just in time, the DNA results came back from the lab. Skylar's DNA was found in Sheila's car trunk. This was probable cause to finally arrest Sheila. By mid-April 2013, Sheila and Rachel were finally in prison. Sheila was arrested in a parking lot and charged with first-degree murder. Sheila left on May 1st. Rachel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for cooperating with the police. But when Sheila was brought to court, she smiled and pleaded not guilty. Dave and Mary still had a long way to go in any kind of justice. As everyone was getting ready for a lengthy and tiring trial, the police were trying to get to the bottom of the motive. Why had Sheila and Rachel killed Skylar? Not liking her simply didn't make sense. As the police talked to the students, they started painting a dark picture. Morgan told the police how she had a bad feeling about Rachel and Sheila from the moment Skylar started hanging out with them. This wasn't jealousy on her behalf, just worries about the disturbing dynamic between them. She hung out with every crowd. She had lots of friends and they were 20-some years old. That's just a little strange. Not just that, but the three were literally inseparable at school. They wouldn't spend a minute as Skylar seemed to change as a result of her time with them. Sheila was defiant, arrogant bully, and her energy spread onto Skylar. By the spring of 2012, the three-way friendship didn't work anymore. Sheila and Rachel wanted to spend more and more time together and less time with Skylar. Schoolmates would hear the two diss Skylar whenever she wasn't around. One time, Skylar's classmate Fantasia heard about something truly disturbing from Rachel. Rachel was ranting to me how much she didn't like Skylar one day. Well, she said word for word, I'm pretty sure it was, "I wouldn't mind if she died." At this point, Skylar knew that their relationship wasn't going great, but she didn't trust her friends anymore. Less than 24 hours before she died, Skylar tweeted this about Sheila. "You doing this is why I will never completely trust you." But somehow Sheila convinced Skylar to come with her and Rachel for a drive that night. As months passed and the police worked hard to create a complete picture of the girls' motives, they discovered a strong rumor that Sheila and Rachel had developed an intimate relationship and started feeling that there's a crowd. Of course, they could have just stopped hanging out with Skylar. Instead, they decided they had to kill her and make sure Skylar didn't tell people about their relationship. In January 2014, Sheila was finally sentenced to life prison with the possibility for parole after 15 years. Sheila's attorney read a statement apologizing to Skylar's family for all the pain caused by her and Rachel. Rachel was devastated by her actions, and this could be seen before her arrest. At the trial, she spoke directly to Skylar's parent. "I don't know if there's a proper way to make this apology because there's not even a word to describe the guilt and remorse that I feel each day for what I have done. I became scared and caught up in something that I did not want to do. I never realized the gravity of my action and how many people I have hurt." Hearing this, Dave told Rachel to take her apology and sit on it, as it won't bring justice to his dead daughter. Rachel was sentenced to 30 years in prison, with a possibility for a parole in 10 years. The Neese family will be forever ridden with guilt and regret not knowing the girls better. There had to be signs somewhere. There had to be clue. Sheila and Rachel's former friends were also deeply shaken by the event and have trust issues to this day.